Here we go. Good evening. Tonight we're learning Maseches Gittin Nun Hey. We're starting 4 lines from the top at a new Mishnah. The Mishnah begins, Heid Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada. On the following cases, he gave testimony on all of the following. Ala chareshes shehisia avia sheyotza beget, that a chareshes, who really she has no das. So if she gets married, her father is still able to marry her off. And if in fact he did, then if and when there is a divorce, she's yotza beget, even though the marriage itself is l'chora, only midrabanan, seemingly. The next case, and the next thing that Rav Yochanan ben Gudgada was made was that Baal Katana Bas Yisrael Shenises Lekohen Sho Cheles Petruma, that a Katana, if she marries a Kohen, she is able to eat Truma. V'imesa Ba'ala Yorsha. And if this Katana Yisrael, who marries a Kohen, dies, then her husband is Yoresh. And the third case, Al Hamarish, Hagazel Shebeno Bibira, that if a person steals a beam and they put it into their house, it's built in, it's cemented in, Sheyitol es Damav, Ibnei Takonas Hashavim. In such a case, we only obligate the thief to pay back the cost of the beam because of Takonas Hashavim. We don't want to make it impossible for a person to do tshuva. So let's say I go over to a construction site, I steal a $50,000 steel beam, I put it on my construction site, and then I build my house around it. So Takonas Hashavim would say, there's no way that I'm going to undo my hundreds of thousands of dollars of house to give you back your beam. I won't be able to do tshuva. So the Chachamim said, fine, just give the financial equivalent and dayenu, that's enough. And lastly, in our Mishnah, and most complicated, the al-chatas hagzula. If a person were to steal a chatas, shelo noda l'rabim, and it wasn't known to the people that it was stolen, shehi mechaperes, that in fact there still is kapara for the bailim who brought it. Says the Gemara, mibnei tikun hamizbeach. A little bit of an odd language. What's tikun hamizbeach? So for that, we'll have to take a look in the Gemara. 10, 12 lines down, and hey, Amar Aleph at the opening of the Gemara. Amar Rava, me'edusa sherav Yochanan ben Gudgada. Amar le'edim, according to what we've learned, we should say the following. Ra'u get zeh she'ani nosein la. A man says to Edim, see, this is the get, and I plan to give it to my wife. And he holds up a get, a proper get, written beautifully, perfectly, 12 lines, the whole thing, done perfectly. And then v'chazar v'amar la. But when he gets to the woman to actually deliver the get, he does hand her the get. But when he does, he throws a little curveball. V'amar la, kansi shtar chov zeh. Take this shtar chov from me. So it was a little dishonest because he was actually giving her a get. But verbally, he said, here's your shtar chov. So yes, it's a get, and he handed her a get, and that's what the Chumash says, v'chasav lav nasam biyada. But the curveball was that he called it a different shtar. So the din is, says Rava, based on the Eidus of Rav Yochanan ben Gudgada, hareze megureshes, the halacha is that they should then be divorced. After all, says the Gemara, Milo Amar Rav Yochanan ben Gudgada lo ba'inan daita. The fact that a chareshes in our Mishnah is able to get divorced, she has no das. So if she has no das, then nobody needs das to get divorced. So therefore, the Gemara says it must be that in this case too, that even if a man gives a woman a get and says that it's a shtar chov, halacha l'maisa, we would assume that they are still divorced. So says the Gemara, hachanami lo ba'inan daita, maybe in our case too. And the Gemara says this whole thing is ridiculous. Pshita, of course they're divorced. Of course they're divorced. There's nothing to talk about. We don't need her permission to get divorced. She can be divorced bal korcha. So says the Gemara, no. Ma'u de tema, that Kevan de Amar, once he said kansi shtar chov zeh, when he referred to his get as a shtar chov, that maybe we would have thought that betule batle, that his intention by calling it a shtar chov is to say that I wish that this get will not take effect. If I wanted it to be a get, I would have called it a get. But maybe when I referred to it as a shtar chov, when I handed it to my wife, maybe it's betule batle. Kamash malan, that's not the case. That im isa devatle, that if he really did want to be mevatel the get, what would he have done? Le'edim hava amar lahu. He would have said to the edim, I don't want to get divorced. A second earlier, he said to the edim, hey, everybody take a look. Here's my get. Second later, he says to the woman, kansi shtar chov zeh. So we see that if he really wanted to get divorced, he would have said to the edim, the reason he said it the way that he did, he called his get as a shtar chov is mishum kisufa, because he was embarrassed. It's uncomfortable, I'm sure, and under those circumstances, even under those circumstances, they are divorced. So that's din number 1, is that we learn a chiddush from the Gemara based on Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada in our Mishnah, that if a man were to say Kansi Shtar Chov Zeh, but that when he hands a get to his wife, he refers to it as a Shtar Chov, halacha l'maisa, she's still divorced, and we don't assume that his change in language was to be mevatel the get, but rather he was just uncomfortable saying the truth, which is, here is your get. And we had said in our Mishnah of Al Ketana Bas Yisrael, we had said about our Mishnah that if a Ketana Bas Yisrael marries a Kohen, that she, even as a Ketana, is allowed to eat the Truma of the Kohen. And the Gemara makes a diuk over here that says V'ilu chareshes lo achla, that when Rav Yochanan ben Gudgada referred to the chareshes in the first case, all he said is that she's yotza beget, but he did not say that she could eat truma. So the Gemara infers that a chareshes is not allowed to eat truma, because if she was allowed to eat truma, then just like the second case in our Mishnah by the Ketana, where it was mentioned, we should have assumed the same by the chareshes. So my taima, what must be the reasoning of Rav Yochanan ben Gudgada to restrict a chareshes from eating truma? Says the Gemara, Gzera Shema Yachil Cheresh bechareshes. We're afraid of confusing a case of where a chareshes is married to a kohen with the case of a chareshes who's married to a cheresh who's a kohen, and that is not allowed. Says the Gemara, big deal. Vilechol, let them eat. Katan ochel nevelosu. When we see our children who are just on Shabbos, this past Shabbos, some 4-year-old boy came over. I was at someone's house and they said, Tati, not me, the father of the house, Tati, are we allowed to put this together? There's like toy screws and toy screwdrivers. They're real shilas and post-game on. If you tighten a real screw, it's a real screw. The fact that it's a toy doesn't mean it's not a screw. It does screw the two things together. So Katan just go play. They're 4 years old. They don't know what they're doing. We can't tell them to go do it. We're not machil trefos be a dime to a katan. But here, if you look at the language here, it's katan ochel neve. He's doing it on his own. So the charesh is too big deal. Let her eat it. Who cares? Even if the cheresh eats, no big deal. Says the Gemara, Gzera Shema Yachil Cheresh b'pikachas. Perhaps we'll have a scenario where a cheresh is a kohen and he's going to feed a pikachas that he marries a regular healthy woman, and that's not allowed. And we're concerned that okay, maybe you have a svar to say that they could be a katan ochel nevelos. No big deal if they eat. Maybe that's true. But what if the cheresh ends up marrying a pikachas? That's very problematic. Says the Gemara, fine. But perhaps maybe we shouldn't allow them to eat truma d'oraisa, but maybe we should allow them to eat truma d'rabbanan. This chareshes in our Mishnah. Says the Gemara, no, we're categorical about it. The inference about the chareshes in our Mishnah is correct. She's never allowed to eat any truma because gzera shema asila achule b'truma d'oraisa. Because of all of these rabbinic concerns, we never allow a chareshes to eat truma. A ketana has das she will have das when she's older, even though halachically she doesn't. She may well have her wits to her. I'm sure we all know people who are under bar mitzvah who act like they're above bar mitzvah, and I'm sure we know people who are above bar mitzvah who act like they're toddlers. So for sure that's the case. So we for sure know that over here that the katan is trustworthy, but the chareshes, we could never have a scenario where it's allowed, and therefore we restrict it outright. And then the Mishnah, the third case of our Mishnah, we're 2/3 of the way down, had said that if somebody does steal a beam, but they build it into the frame of their house, our Mishnah had said that that because we want to make sure that people have a reasonable opportunity to do tshuva, we therefore said that you only have to pay the financial equivalent of the beam. In the example I gave, the $50,000 in cash, instead of dismantling your whole house. So it says the Gemara that not everybody agrees with this. Tanu Rabbanan, the Brisa writes, if a person steals a beam and he builds it into his house, you have to dismantle the entire house. What are you doing? You're not allowed to take somebody else's stuff. You're just a kanev. You have to return what you stole. That all you have to pay back is the demay, the financial equivalent of that which you stole, that which you built into the house. Why? This is a classical difference in the approach of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. That Beis Shammai was like a sledgehammer in regards to psak. He doesn't care, it isn't about your feelings. If you want tshuva, you keep halacha. That's your fault. You shouldn't have stolen in the first place. And there's yesh bazeh davar ma, and Beis Hillel agrees he shouldn't have stolen, but he knows the human psychology. And the human psychology is, I'm really sorry. You want me to dismantle my $300,000-$400,000 house for $50,000? I'm not doing it. I can't do it. I'll pay you. I can't dismantle. Beis Hillel was mekel. Let's talk about the case of the chatas gzula. Amar Ula, davar Torah, here is the din according to the Torah. Bein noda uvein lo noda. Eina mechaperes. Whether or not the theft was known, it doesn't matter. Eina mechaperes. This chatas really should not be mechaper. My taima. Why not? And this is one side of a massive machlokes in the Tanaim. That is because, I should say the Amoraim, Yeush Kedi lo kani. Yeush Kedi, Yeush by itself. Yeush in a vacuum is not enough to allow the Gazlan to have a proper kinyan. Why? Because when it's just Yeush, and it's not Yeush with Shinui Rishus, that would be the other factor. When it's just Yeush, then the Bailim still hope for the likelihood, the possibility of getting their item back. Yet we know in our Mishnah that that's not the case. In our Mishnah, it says in regards to that fourth case, that mibnei tikun hamizbeach, that we do say that the korban is mechaperes. So umatam amru lo noda mechaperes. Why then was our Mishnah exceedingly mekil to override a din deoraisa? That because we know that it's the case that yeush kedi lo kani, and really it's eina mechaperes because the bailim still have hope that their item will come back to them. So why did our Mishnah say that there's still some degree of kapara? We said that shelo yehu kohanim atzevim, so that the kohanim won't be sad about the fact that they partook of a korban that they really ideally shouldn't have. This is such an odd Gemara and requires a lot of time, which we don't have. But Amri le Rabban Leula, I don't understand. You're saying that it's because the reason our Mishnah says that lo noda is that a case of lo noda is mechaperes is because kohanim atzevim, but v'ha'anan bipnei tikun hamizbech tanan. Our Mishnah doesn't speak about the kohanim. Our Mishnah says that the reason why a case of lo noda, that if it was stolen and it wasn't publicly known, the reason why we say there's still kapara for the bailim is because of the mizbech, not because of the kohanim. So the Gemara says you're right, but there's more than one domino in this scenario. Amar lahem, kevan to kohanim asevim nimsa mizbeach batal, and therefore mibnei tikun hamizbeach, we said that chatas gzula shelo noda l'rabim is mechaperes. All of that is approach number one, which at its core focuses on the fact that yeush kedi lo kani, that yeush on its own is not considered to be a kinyan because we need yeush plus shinui rishus. However, approach number two is quite opposite. 2-3 lines from the bottom on Nun Hamad Aleph. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Davar Torah, really according to the Torah, bein noda uvein lo noda mechaperes. Really, it doesn't matter what happened. Really, this kinyan, the gzula works. That if you steal something, the korban is perfectly fine midoraisa. Why? My taima, because unlike the approach that Ula took, yeush kedi is kani. He says that yeush in a vacuum, even without shinui rishus, is 100%. This guy who had his property stolen from him is never hoping for, he's done thinking about, he's written it off, and his taxes, he's done. This is gone now. He's done. So he's not worried anymore. So this is the machlokes amoraim. Let's articulate it again. That according to the first approach of Ula, yeush kedi lo kani, yeush on its own is not considered a sufficient type of yeush to assume that ownership has transferred to the Ganev or to the Gazlan. But according to the second approach of Rav Yehuda the Amora, he says that yeush kedi is kani. Turning to the top of Nun Ham and Beis, and we'll be going to a few lines into the wide lines toward the bottom of the page, not quite to the end. And then tomorrow is Kamsa Ubar Kamsa, some famous, very well-known Gemaras. So the Gemara says on the top of Nun Ham and Beis, Umatam Amr Noda Eina Mechaperes. According to Rav Yehuda, why would it be that he would hold that there's no kapara? So the Gemara responds, Shelo Yomr Mizbech Ochel Gzelos. Totally different issue. He says that the reason why we have a case scenario of noda eina mechuparas, that if we know that there was theft, that there is no kapara. Why is that? Because we don't want people to say about the mizbeach that it's willing to consume gzelos. It's willing to consume food that's been stolen. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. Bishlama Ula, I understand Ula's perspective. Hainu dekatani chatas. According to Ula, the concern that he said that we have is one of nimtza mizbeach batel. So therefore the chatas makes a lot of sense. However, says the Gemara Elad Rav Yehuda, according to Rav Yehuda, my irya chatas afilu ola nami. According to Rav Yehuda, whose broad concern is that we don't want people to think that the mizbeach is ochel gzelos. Why does our Mishnah speak about a chatas? Any animal that's brought on the mizbeach that's gazul should be problematic according to the svar of Rabbi Yehuda, and that's not the case because he gives an answer that says ochle gzelos, which implies everything. But our Mishnah only speaks about a case of chatas, zakash and Rabbi Yehuda, and the Gemara responds 4 lines down on Nun Ham and Beis Lomi Boyaka Amar. It's telling you multiple things. Lo mi boya, I don't need you to tell me Ola de Kalil he. Of course, an Ola is going to be problematic because the Ola is actually it's ne'echal by the mizbech. The whole thing is consumed. But perhaps I would have thought about a chatas differently because a chatas is not fully consumed by the mizbech. After all, in regards to a chatas, we put the fats, we put the blood on the mizbech, but the idach, the rest, all the flesh that's actually edible, that kohanim achlile. So here too, Rabbi Yehuda says, afilu hachi gazer shelo yomru mizbech ochel gzelos. So what he says is we're learning two things from our Mishnah. The obvious and unstated is the case of an ola, which is fully consumed by the mizbech. Pashut, he's concerned about that. His chiddush is that we're even concerned about a case of achatas, which is at least mostly consumed by the kohanim. Another question, the Gemara says 10 lines down, Tanan, we have a Mishnah, our Mishnah. Al chatas hagzula shelo noda lerabim shehi mechaperes mipnei tikun hamizbeach. We had said that if there was a chatas that was stolen and nobody knew about it, there's still kapara because of the mizbeach. Bishlam alaula, who says that really Medina it should not have a kapara, but we say that the Chachamim instituted a kapara. That makes perfect sense. Elad Rabbi Yehuda ibchame baile. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Ladina it really should work, but we were makbid that it should not work. So the language of our Mishnah is backwards according to Rabbi Yehuda's approach. So says the Gemara, you're right, quarter of the way down. Hachanami kamar. It's saying a couple of things. First of all, lo noda'a mechaperes. If we didn't know, if the public didn't know about this, the Kohanim didn't know, then mechaperes. But noda'a, if it was known, then eina mechaperes. Why is that? Why is it that we say lo noda mechaperes mipnei tikun hamizbeach? And Rabbi Yehuda gets out of that question as well. Let's try again, a little bit more lamdish this time. Masiv Rava. We know that if a person violates gneva and he's caught, he's chayav to pay kefel. And if he's shochet that animal, he's chayav daled behei. He has to pay either 4 or 5 times the cost of the animal that he stole. And 4 or 5 is dependent on the size of the animal. A sheep, a goat, those are 4x. A cow is 5x. So that's what kefel is and daled behei. So let's talk about this particular case and let's follow the flow carefully. Ganav, I steal an animal, and then v'hiktish, and then I sanctified it to the Beis HaMikdash, and then ve'achar kach tavachu machar. So the gneva I did on my own terms, but I did the shchita after I was makdish the animal. So says the Gemara, mishalim tashlume kefel ve'enu mishalim tashlume arba v'chamisha. I'm obligated to pay the kefil because that was before hektish, before I was makdish the thing. But I don't have to pay arba v'chamisha, 4 times the sheep's cost or 5 times the cow's cost, because that shchita that I did, granted, was wrong, but it really wasn't mine. So I didn't do it while it was in my property. The Tani Allah bachutz, that if a person were to shecht this animal in the wrong place, we learned ki hay gavna anush kares, that there would in fact be an iser kares if this animal was shechted in the wrong place. So now comes the Gemara's beautiful question. If in fact you're going to say that Yeush Kedi, Yeush by itself, is not Koneh, well, if Yeush by itself is not Koneh, that means in this case of Ganav v'hiktish ve'achar kach tavachu machar, if I was Ganav, and we say that Yeush Kedi is not Koneh, then really the kinyan isn't a full kinyan. And if that's true, Kares, my avidite. This brisa seems to say that gneva alone brings about a scenario that could lead to kares, minus all the kefel daled behei stuff. Just remember the one piece that korban, if it's shechted in the wrong place after you stole it, you're chayiv kares. How could you be chayiv kares if we hold yeush kedi lo kani? If you hold that yeush alone is not considered to be a real yeush, then the gneva was usher, but it's not a full kinyan. Elamai, must be that yeush kedi is kona. So it says the Gemara. Amar Rav Shezvi says a huge whopper of a chiddush. Don't worry. Kares midivrehem. Kares, but only on a derabanan level. Mechatesi. And not only do we not understand that, the people in the... What? Achichu alei. They all laughed at him when he said that. They're like, what are you talking about? Kares midivrehem mi'ika? Kares is a massive consequence. I mean, that's like, you're done, you're out. Like chametz on Pesach, bris milah, the Paschal lamb, like you're done. You're not Klal Yisrael anymore, you're done. There's a din derabanan of kares, like it doesn't even, we understand by malkos. Like you have a malkos proper, malkos mardus. We have a profile for that. It's not permanent. It's rabbinic in nature, but kares is this kind of end of the road type of punishment. You're not even a bar chiyuva for kares until you're 20. We know the underdeveloped brain of teenagers. There's no chance that they're sophisticated enough to not violate Isuri. We assume they're going to do that. It's normal. So the Gemara says, Amar lahu Rava, be careful. Gavra Rabba Amar Milsa lo tachuchu Allah. When great people say things, be careful not to laugh at them. That in this case, we have a case of real kares that came about through the rabbi's words. Ukmuha Rabbanan Birshuse, the Chachamim established that which he stole is fully in his property, ki hechi delechayev Allah, so that in fact there's a real iser deoraisa of kares on Ukmuha Rabbanan Birshuse. How does that work? That's incredible. That means that because the Chachamim said that this is in your Rishus now, you know of a din kares midoraisa. And really, there is no kares midivrehem. That's not even what Rav Shezvi meant. Rav Shezvi meant to say that when the Chachamim put it in your Rishus, now you have a real chiyuv kares. Afal pi that yeyush kedi is lo kani. It's still not a full kinyan, but the Chachamim made it that it's yours. And that's what the Mishnah is saying. The Bryce is saying, Gun of Hiktish, that you're going to be chayiv kares. Omar Rava changes gears just a drop, but in the same sugya. Vadai kami bayali. But the following thing I really do have a kasha on, says Rava. Ki ukmuha rabbanan birshusei. When it was that the rabbis assumed that even if we hold Yeush Kadi Lo Kani, that even if the kinyan that was created, the Yeush that existed by the owner after the Ganav stole, even if it was incomplete, but when the Chachamim put it in your Rishus, is it Mishas Gneva or Mishas Hektesha? Is it from the moment he stole at 9:45 p.m., or is it from the time that he was makdish at 9:45 a.m. the next day? L'may nafkamina. What would be the difference? Legizo seha vivlado seha. These are phrases we should remember from somewhere in Shas, because I remember them vaguely. Anyone know where? I don't remember where. But we learned about Gizo Sevav Lodos a number of times. Fine. The Gemara says the nafkamina would be timing, because if it was his from 9:45 p.m., he gets 12 hours of growth of hair, whatever that is, and the children that are born in that time are his. But if we say that it's Mishas Hekdesha, so then no. Then if it only becomes him, if the Chachamim only created this reality that it's actually in his Rishus from the time of Hekdesh, then he gets nothing. So what's the din? Hadar Omar Rava. Rava gave an answer of his own. Mistabra, what sounds logical to me is Mishas Hekdesha. Shelo yehi chote niskar. When the Chachamim were extending the rule to say that this is actually in your Rishus, Afal Pi, that it's really not in your Rishus, but the Chachamim are putting it in your Rishus, because Yesh Kedi Lo Kani, when did the Chachamim institute that it would be a part of your Rishus? Mishas Geneva, the earlier time, or Mishas Hekdesha. The Gemara says it's from Hekdesha. Shelo yehi chote niskar. We don't want this guy to benefit any more than he's benefiting already, and therefore we're not going to say, we're going to put it in his Rishus. We are, in order to bring him to the place of Kares. But we are going to say that it's only from the moment of Hekdesh and not from the moment of Geneva. We're going to begin this sugya. We won't really have time to do justice because there's a lot of agadatas that give color to this new Mishnah, but this new Mishnah is a little bit more than halfway down in Hamid Beis. Let's begin. Lo haya sikrikon b'Yehuda beharuge milchama. A sikrikon was basically a mafioso type of thing where they would say, give me your property or I'm going to kill you. So usually in those cases, you hand over the keys. So the Gemara says that in the time of haruge milchama, there was no sikrikon. Meharuge hamilchama ve'elech, after the killings of battle and onwards, namely post-war, yesh ba sikrikon. Then we do have rules of sikrikon. We have no idea what this is talking about. And therefore, the Mishnah says, Ketzad. The Gemara says, what are the scenarios that we are talking about here when we have halachos of sikrikon? The Gemara says, Lokach mi sikrikon. If I purchased a property from these mafia guys, and then v'chazar v'lokach mi balabais, and afterwards I went over to the original owner that the sikrikon stole from, and I bought it from him, mekcho batel. The reason the mekach is batel is because the balabais never wanted to sell to the sikrikon in the first place. He just didn't have a choice. And onis rachman patre. He didn't want to make the sale in the first place, so we let it go. Now, if I first purchased it mi balabais, and then v'chazar v'lakach mi sikrikon, if I purchased it from Shmuel on day 1, the sikrikon showed up on day 2, and then I went to the sikrikon on day 3 and bought it off of them, then mekcho kayim, because I know the original buyer was willing to sell, because I bought it from him before it was sikrikon, before the mafia came in. Lakach min ha'ish. If I buy it from a man, v'chazar v'lakach min ha'isha, and then afterwards I buy it from a wife, well, maybe mekro batel. Why? Because really, maybe the property was hers initially, and the only reason that she gave it to him was because she felt compelled to do so as a wife. She didn't really want to, so that's not a good mekach. But min ha'isha, if first I were to purchase the property from the woman, v'chazar v'lakach min ha'ish, then mekro kaim. And all of this, says the Mishnah, zu Mishnah Rishona. This was the first iteration of this din. Very unique Mishnah, which paints two layers of history in one shot. Bezdin Shalacherim Amru, Halokech mi Sikrikon, that when one does in fact purchase from Sikrikon, from these mafioso people, you're allowed to do so, and no sin lebailim revia, and you have to pay a quarter of the cost of the property to the bailim, and then you're good to go. A Masai. When do we have this din, this second version of the din, that I'm allowed to purchase from Sikrikon and pay the bailim only a quarter of the cost of the property? That's bizman she'ein biyadon likach. That's only true when the initial buyers are not able to make the purchase from the Sikrikon. Aval yesh biyadon likach. If the initial buyers who initially owned the property before the Sikrikon, the mafioso guys, took it from him, if he's able to go back and buy it, so then hein kedum l'chol adam. They have the first right of refusal as it relates to the properties because it was initially theirs and the mafia guy stole it from them. Rebbe Hoshiv Beistin of Animno, Rebbe sat with his bezdin and they made the following rule: Sheim shasa bifnei sikrikon shnemasar chodesh kol hakodem likach zacha. That if there was 12 months of opportunity for the original owner for first rights of refusal to his property that used to be his, that's now in the hands of the Sikrikon, if 12 months have passed, then he loses his first rights of refusal, and then whoever goes over to the Sikrikon and pays is able to win. Aval, still, no saying the Bailim Revia, we still are going to pay a quarter of the original cost of the property to the original owners. So says the Gemara, I don't understand the Mishnah. The laws of Sikrikon, what did we learn in our Mishnah? Hashta beharuge hamilchama, lo haya ba Sikrikon, meharuge milchama ve'elach yesh ba Sikrikon. When things were very dangerous, we didn't apply the rules of Sikrikon, and only afterwards we did. So the Gemara says, two lines before the wide lines, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, lo danu ba din Sikrikon ka'amar. We were not dealing with the din Sikrikon, a little bit of a cryptic answer. So let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, about 20 lines from the bottom of the page at the beginning of the Gemara, Dibur hamaschil lo danu din sikrikon beharuge hamilchama dekani legamre. This was actually a full purchase. During the haruge milchama times, when I sold my land to the mafia people, it was a perfect purchase. I had no desire to get it back. I just wanted to save my life. And that's therefore going to be a good purchase. Aval meharuge hamilchama ve'elach, in a little bit of less painful times, then halokech mimenu yesh lo din hamufurish b'mishnah seinu. Our Mishnah is saying that during the times of the Sikrikon, things were so dangerous that when I was forced to give my property to the Sikrikon, it was belev shalem, take my property, save my life. The rules of our Mishnah only apply mi haruge milchama ve'elach, because that was a little bit of a less unpeaceful time. And in fact, the Gemara says as follows: Amar Rav Asi shalosh gzeros gazru. Rav Asi says that there were 3 layers of gzeros that were put into place. We'll see soon that this was the beginning of the end of the times of the Beis HaMikdash. To Amar Rav Asi shalosh gzeros gazru, gezarta kamaisa. We're at the first of the very long lines in Hamad Beis, almost done for the day. The first gzera was kol delo katil. Anyone who doesn't kill a yid who has an opportunity to do so, lik teluha. That guy, the guy who didn't kill, is going to be killed. If there's a Jew walking down the street and you have a shiv, you have a knife, you have whatever, you got to kill. And if you don't do it, the first gzera was that the people who didn't kill must be killed. And then when things were slightly less calm, mitziyasa, the middle of the 3 gzeros that was put into place, was kol dekatil laisi arba zuze. Anyone who killed would have to bring 4 zuz, or possibly get 4 zuz, depending on what the Rishonim say over here. That's different than, right? The first version was if you don't kill someone, you're killed. The second is either you have to pay 4 zuz for not having killed, or you get paid 4 zuz, which are one of the two. And then the last one, basraisa, the final of all of the gzeros that went into place was called the katil likteluha. That's when things were much more peaceful. So that if you kill a Jew, you get punished for it, right? That's a healthier set of rules, I believe. So Hilkach says the Gemara as follows: Kamayaso mitziyasa, in the first two time frames, the first time frame being that if you don't kill a Jew, you're killed, and in the middle time frame when I'm going to pay you if you kill. Kevan de Katle, since murder was happening, Agav onse gamaru makne. We assume that all of the sales, all of the acquisitions of the sikrikon that took place during this time, when the mafia guys would walk over to the Jews during one of the tkufas of either the first or second takana, that's gamaru makne. A belev shalem, take my field. It's yours and I never want it back. But Basraisa, when things were calmer, in the times of the final Gzeira, when if somebody killed a Jew, they were killed, regular rules of society, then Amre Ha'idna Lishko. Now this is the right time to apply the rules of our Mishnah, Lemachar Tavana, take it today, and tomorrow I'll claim you in Bezdin, Tavana Le Bedina. And tomorrow we'll begin to speak about Kamsa and Bar Kamsa and some very well-known stories. As you can see, it's a lengthy Amud on both sides, really pretty fat Gemara over the next couple of days. And wow, okay, over the next 3 or 4 days, and hopefully it's less difficult than all the Eved stuff that we've been working on. And we'll stop right here, and wishing you all a beautiful night.